Open your banking app right now. Before you look at the number, just pause for 1 second. Because whatever that number is sitting on your screen, it is not just money. It is stress. It is security. It is freedom. Or the absence of all three at once. Maybe it is $417. Maybe it is $2,843. Maybe it is $19 until Friday and you are already calculating whether you can make that stretch. And every single time you open that app and see that number, there is a quiet pressure that settles somewhere in your chest. A pressure most people carry every single day and never talk about out loud. You close the app. You open social media. And within 30 seconds you are watching someone post their vacation photos from a beach you have never been to. Someone else just bought a house. Another person just drove their brand new car off the lot and filmed the whole thing. And somewhere in the back of your mind, before you even consciously register the thought, you wonder, how do they make it look so easy? Then one day someone tells you that once you save your first $10,000, the next $10,000 comes twice as fast. And you almost laugh. Because if saving $1,000 already feels like climbing a wall with no handholds, the idea of $10,000 feeling easy sounds like something people say to make you feel better about being behind. My name is Milton and I have spent a whole lot of time studying the patterns behind financial independence, why some people build lasting wealth and others stay stuck in cycles, and I translate those patterns into strategies you can actually apply. But here is what I need you to understand before this video goes any further. That statement is not motivational fluff. It is not the kind of thing financial influencers say to get you to subscribe. It is a documented, mathematically verifiable, psychologically proven fact. And the reason most people never experience it is not because they lack discipline or intelligence or work ethic. It is because nobody ever sat down and explained to them exactly why the first $1,000 is so brutally difficult, and what happens on the other side of it. That is exactly what this video is going to do. We are going to go through the real biology working against you every time you try to save. We are going to cover the psychological identity shift that happens at the $1,000 threshold. We are going to walk through the verified mathematics of compound growth with real numbers and real timelines. And we are going to talk honestly about the emotional role spending plays in everyday American life. Because that conversation is one that most financial channels are too polished to have. If you want to understand how money actually works, not the Instagram version, not the lottery thinking version, but the real compound discipline version, make sure you subscribe before this video is done. Because this is exactly the kind of content we build here every single week. Let us start at the very beginning. Not the beginning of your financial life, the beginning of the human species. For roughly 200,000 years, human beings lived without savings accounts, without investment portfolios, without any concept of building wealth across decades. There was survival. There was food today and the uncertainty of whether food would exist tomorrow. There was immediate shelter and the constant threat of it disappearing. Every resource that was available needed to be used immediately because the future was genuinely uncertain in a way that the modern world has almost completely eliminated. This shaped human neurology in a fundamental and lasting way. Behavioral economists call the result temporal discounting, the deeply embedded tendency to prefer a smaller reward right now over a larger reward in the future. This phenomenon has been replicated in hundreds of academic studies across the United States and internationally. It is not a personality trait. It is not a weakness. It is the predictable output of a brain that was engineered for a world that no longer exists. Here is how clearly it shows up in controlled research. When study participants are offered $100 today or $120 in 30 days, a significant majority choose $100 today. Think about what that means mathematically. They are turning down a guaranteed 20% return in a single month, a return that no investment in the world consistently delivers, because the brain weights immediate rewards so much more heavily than future gain. Now apply that same mechanism to the real financial decisions of everyday American life. You have $50 sitting in your account. Your brain can spend it on something today that provides immediate tangible satisfaction, a meal, a purchase, an experience. Or it can transfer that $50 into an investment account where, at the historical average return of the S&P 500, which has delivered approximately 9 to 10% annually before inflation over the past century, or roughly 6 to 7% adjusted for inflation, it begins a compounding process that builds quietly and powerfully over decades. The math clearly favors the investment. But your brain does not make this decision using math. It makes this decision using the pleasure system. And pleasure now almost always defeats math later. Not because you are making a bad decision consciously. Because your brain is running ancient programming in a modern world and it does not know the difference. There is a second layer to this that almost nobody in personal finance talks about directly. Financial stress does not just feel bad. It literally reduces your cognitive performance in measurable ways. Research from Princeton University and Harvard has documented that financial anxiety consumes cognitive bandwidth, mental processing capacity, in a manner comparable to operating on significant sleep deprivation. When you are stressed about rent, when you are watching your credit card balance and calculating whether you can cover the minimum payment, when you are trying to figure out whether your car will make it to the end of the month without a repair bill, your brain is running a constant background process that consumes real mental resources. Resources that are no longer available for long-term planning, disciplined decision-making, and the kind of forward thinking that wealth building requires. This is why the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is so persistent, and why it has nothing to do with moral failure. According to multiple surveys conducted in recent years, a significant percentage of American households report difficulty covering an unexpected $400 expense without going into debt. This is not limited to low-income households. This pattern shows up consistently among Americans earning $60,000, $70,000, and even $80,000 per year. Because the issue is not income, it is the cognitive and psychological state that financial fragility creates. And fragility keeps people reactive. Reactive people manage crises. They do not build wealth. So when you are sitting there wondering why saving feels so impossible despite working hard and trying your best, this is why. You are not failing at a math problem. You are fighting a biology problem. And the first step to winning that fight is understanding exactly what you are up against. Now let us talk about what the actual experience of saving your first $1,000 looks like on the ground. Let us say you decide to save $100 every month. That is $1,200 per year, a number that sounds modest and achievable when you say it out loud. At $100 per month, you reach your first $1,000 in 10 months. 10 months sounds short. But those 10 months are not a neutral experience. They are 10 months of saying no to small conveniences that your brain has become accustomed to. 10 months of watching your friends make purchases you are choosing not to make. 10 months of opening your savings account and seeing a number that does not feel significant enough to justify the restraint required to build it. You do not feel richer during those 10 months. You do not feel powerful. Your daily life looks almost identical from the outside. You are making the sacrifice without yet experiencing the reward. Physicists describe a concept called activation energy, the minimum amount of energy required to initiate a reaction. A chemical reaction will not start without it, regardless of how much potential energy exists in the system. Your financial life works exactly the same way. When your savings balance is at zero, your financial momentum is at zero. And moving from zero momentum requires more energy, more discipline, more conscious decision-making, more deliberate resistance to your own impulses than any other stage of the wealth-building process. This is what I call the activation phase. It is the period between deciding to save and reaching the first psychological threshold where saving begins to feel sustainable rather than punishing. Most people quit during the activation phase, not because the sacrifice is genuinely unbearable, but because the payoff has not yet arrived and they have no personal evidence that it is coming. Here is what the payoff actually looks like and why it changes everything. Psychology describes a concept called self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to execute a specific behavior and achieve a specific outcome. Self-efficacy is not general confidence. It is domain-specific. You can have high self-efficacy in your career while having low self-efficacy in your finances. And before you have ever successfully saved $1,000, your financial self-efficacy is built entirely on theory and hope, because you have no personal evidence that you can do it. Before the $1,000 milestone, the quiet inner narrative of many Americans sounds like some version of, "I am just not good with money. It is something other people understand. Not me." This narrative is rarely something people would say out loud. But it operates below the level of conscious thought, and it influences micro-decisions throughout every single day. The moment your savings balance crosses $1,000 for the first time and you choose not to touch it, something specific and measurable changes. You now have personal evidence. Not a YouTube video telling you it is possible. Not a book describing someone else's success. Your own direct, first-person experience proving that you are capable of controlling money. That you can choose your future over your present. That you are the kind of person who saves. And human beings behave consistently with their identity. When you identify as someone who is bad with money, you unconsciously make decisions that confirm that identity, because the brain seeks consistency between belief and behavior. When you identify as someone who saves, the same mechanism works in your favor. You hesitate before impulsive spending. You begin thinking in terms of opportunity cost. You start seeing the price tag of a purchase not just as what it costs today but as what it costs you in future growth. The first $1,000 is not just a financial milestone. It is an identity construction event. And the identity built at that milestone is the foundation every subsequent financial decision gets built on top of. Now let us get into the mathematics, because this is where the story of why it gets easier stops being psychology and starts being pure arithmetic. If you invest $10,000 at a 7% average annual return, the inflation-adjusted historical average for broad U.S. market index funds, and you never add another dollar, your balance after 10 years is approximately $19,671. After 20 years it has grown to approximately $38,697. After 30 years it stands at approximately $76,122. More than 7 times your original investment. Without a single additional contribution. That is compound interest doing the only thing it knows how to do, working continuously, without breaks, without sick days, without complaints. But the truly powerful illustration of compounding is not the end number. It is the acceleration of growth across time. In year 1 of that $10,000 investment, your 7% return generates $700. In year 10, your return on the compounded balance generates approximately $1,374. In year 20, it generates approximately $2,709. In year 30, it generates approximately $5,329. The balance grows every year. And because the growth applies to a larger base each time, the growth itself grows. This is the mathematical engine that makes wealth self-accelerating once it reaches sufficient scale. Consider the same principle applied to $50,000 invested at 7%. That balance generates approximately $3,500 annually, about $291 every single month, without you doing anything. While you are sleeping. While you are at work. While you are watching television. Your money is earning more money. At $100,000 invested at the same rate, your annual return is approximately $7,000. At $250,000, approximately $17,500 per year. At this level, something fundamental has changed in your financial life. Your wealth is no longer dependent on your effort. The direct connection between how hard you work and how fast your money grows has been severed. Your assets are contributing more to your net worth than your active income contributions. Effort has decoupled from growth. And when effort decouples from growth, the acceleration that seemed impossible during those first 10 months of saving $100 becomes not just possible, it becomes automatic. This is why financial experts consistently say that the first $100,000 is the hardest to save. Not because saving $100,000 requires more discipline than saving $1,000, although it certainly requires more time. But because below the $100,000 level, your contributions are the primary engine of your wealth growth. Every dollar in your account got there because you put it there. Above $100,000 at reasonable market returns, your assets begin doing meaningful work alongside you. At $100,000 earning 7%, your investments generate $7,000 annually. If you are also contributing $500 per month, you are adding $13,000 to your net worth each year, half from your contributions and half from your existing assets. The second $100,000 arrives demonstrably faster than the first. Not because anything magical happened. Because the mathematics of compounding are fixed and reliable, and they do not care how you feel about them. Now let us address something that the standard compound interest explanation consistently leaves out, and this omission is responsible for more financial failure than any other gap in financial education in America. Spending is emotional self-regulation. This is not a judgment. This is a behavioral science observation. When people make financial decisions that hurt their long-term wealth, and this includes the vast majority of Americans at some point, they are almost never doing it out of stupidity or carelessness. They are doing it because they are managing a very real emotional experience using the tools available to them. People buy coffee every morning not just because of caffeine. It is a ritual of comfort in an otherwise uncertain day. People buy new clothes they do not strictly need because clothing is identity. It is a way of telling the world and themselves a story about who they are and who they are becoming. People go out to eat not just because they are hungry. Dining is relief, it is connection, it is a reward for a hard week that did not have enough rewards in it. People buy gadgets and electronics for novelty, the brief dopamine hit of something new in a routine that feels repetitive. None of these are irrational behaviors. They are all completely human responses to emotional states that are not being addressed another way. But they have a compounding cost that most people never calculate honestly. A $5 daily coffee habit on weekdays costs approximately $1,300 per year. Invested at 7% over 30 years, that same $1,300 annually would accumulate to approximately $122,000. That is not a number designed to shame anyone for enjoying coffee. It is a number designed to illustrate that small behaviors, repeated daily over a lifetime, have enormous compound consequences, in exactly the same way that small investments, made consistently over decades, produce enormous compound results. The mechanism is identical. The direction is opposite. The difference between people who build wealth and people who do not is rarely that the wealthy have more discipline or more sacrifice built into their lives. The difference is that wealthy people have learned to redirect their emotional regulation away from spending and toward building. They still want to feel good. They still want the dopamine hit, the sense of control, the reward after a hard week. But they have rewired where they get it from. Instead of feeling good about buying something new, they feel good about watching their net worth increase. Instead of getting the reward hit from a purchase, they get it from hitting a savings milestone. Instead of the emotional satisfaction coming from spending, it comes from the number on the investment account screen going up. The emotional mechanism is exactly the same. The financial direction is completely different. And once that psychological inversion takes hold, once saving starts to feel rewarding instead of depriving, the trajectory of a person's financial life changes permanently. Achieving this inversion deliberately is possible. But it requires understanding that the goal is not to eliminate emotion from financial decisions. Emotion cannot be eliminated, it can only be redirected. The goal is to build an environment, and a set of habits where the emotional reward flows from wealth building rather than wealth spending. That process starts with the first $1,000. Let us bring everything together and make this concrete. Your first $1,000 is the hardest money you will ever save for 3 simultaneous reasons. First, your biology is working against you through temporal discounting, weighting immediate pleasure over future gain in every financial decision you make. Second, financial stress is consuming cognitive bandwidth that you need for disciplined long-term thinking, keeping you reactive and crisis-focused instead of proactive and growth-focused. Third, your financial identity has not yet been constructed. You are saving on faith, without personal evidence, against a quiet inner narrative that says wealth is for other people. When you push through the activation phase and cross that first $1,000 threshold, and choose to leave it there, all three of those forces begin to reverse simultaneously. Your temporal discounting shifts because you now have a growing balance that provides its own satisfaction. Your cognitive bandwidth begins to free up as financial security, even at a small scale, reduces background anxiety. And your financial identity changes from someone trying to save to someone who saves. 3 reversals at once. From 3 forces that were all pointing against you, to 3 forces that now begin pointing with you. The mathematics then take over from the psychology. Each month your compounding balance contributes slightly more to your growth. Each year the return on your existing balance grows larger relative to your new contributions. Each decade the acceleration becomes more visible, more dramatic, and more motivating. Until the point where your assets are generating more annual return than you contribute in a year. Until the point where a market return alone adds more to your net worth in 12 months than your income did during the first 12 months of your saving journey. This is not a fantasy. This is arithmetic applied to time. It is not available to exceptional people. It is available to any person willing to endure the activation phase long enough for momentum to take over. Your financial independence is not waiting for a lucky break. It is not waiting for the right opportunity, or the right economic conditions, or the right income. It is waiting for the discipline to be sustained long enough for the math to compound. The first $1,000 is where that discipline is built, or where it is abandoned. Most people abandon it because nobody ever explained to them what they were actually fighting, why those first 10 months are genuinely the hardest, and what is waiting for them on the other side. Now you know. Drop a comment below and tell me honestly, what is the single biggest thing standing between you and that first $1,000 right now? I want to know where you actually are. And if this gave you something real to think about, subscribe to Investor Milton, because every single week we come back with the kind of financial conversation that cuts through the noise and gets straight to what actually moves the needle. Build intelligently. See you in the next one.